number of people, and you can see on the stage right now, despite the inclement weather, the spirits are high. We've got people ready to get things on the roll. Our 25th reunion class, the class of 1992, has chosen Maura Healy, who is currently the Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and she's the Chief Marshal and will lead all of the alumni festivities today. And did you know, in addition to a long career as a scholar and as a politician, and notably the first public servant as an Attorney General of Massachusetts to be openly gay in the U.S. But did you also know, Nancy, that Maura Healy, all 5'4" of her, was a varsity basketball co-captain at Harvard, and even played pro basketball in Europe for 2 years. So with that, maybe we could get a little bit of an idea of the background of Harvard from you, and why we're here today. How far back does it go?
Before I get into the history of Harvard College and Harvard Commencement, I do want to let everyone know that the actual Alumni Parade itself will be delayed by 15 minutes. Normally, it starts at 1:45, but today it's going to start at 2 o'clock. The weather report is that the rain will clear off later this afternoon, so there was a decision made. But Bill, it's great to be here because this gives us more time to talk about the history and traditions of Harvard. And right now on your screen, you can see the ponchos and the raincoats of people on the steps of the stage. The undergraduates and other graduates are having lunch in their various houses and other locales, and they will be joining us later for Mark Zuckerberg's speech. Harvard College, Bill, as you know, was founded in 1636. It was founded to train ministers for the Massachusetts Bay Colony, because Massachusetts Bay Colony had a religious purpose. They wanted to have a place where the Puritan religion could be practiced. Now, this is a great view of the Centenary Theater, which means the 300-year theater, and that is the main venue for our commencement this afternoon.
And you can see some of the banners up there, too.
And it's important to know, Bill, that commencement has been held on this very spot since 1642. Today is the 366th commencement, and it's held every year right here in Harvard Yard. So it's really a great tradition, and it's the longest running annual ritual in all of North America. So Harvard was founded in 1636, but at the time there was no money to pay any teachers. So they had some scholars who wanted to study, but no money to pay the teachers. And in 1638, a Puritan minister in Charlestown, Massachusetts, a man by the name of John Harvard, died, and he left half of his fortune and all of his books to the college, which at the time was called New College. And in gratitude for that gift, which allowed the first tutors to be hired to teach the first Harvard College scholars, they named the college Harvard College. And they named Cambridge, which had previously been called Newtown, but they named it Cambridge, the city, the same university where John Harvard and other Puritan ministers had attended. So we're grateful to John Harvard today because without his gift and without his books, we would probably not be here today. In the early years, the first commencement was held in 1642, so the scholars started studying in 1638. The first commencement was in 1642, and the Puritan leaders of the colony were so intent on supporting the college that they decided they would come cheer on the graduates at the time that they did their final exams, which were actually discourses, so they had to actually speak in public. And in 1642, therefore, we started this tradition of having a celebration of commencement. And then the following year, they invited the graduates of 1642 to come back to cheer on the graduates of 1643. And that's how the tradition of reunions was started right here in Harvard Yard. So today we're taking a look. We see people are beginning to gather out there with their umbrellas, and we're hoping they won't have to do that for all of their for the whole afternoon. In the early years, this was called the annual celebration of the joy of learning. And Bill, it really does. I really get very excited when I think about this, because when else do you see 35,000 people gathering together to celebrate learning and academic achievement.
And also representing over 350,000 alumni across the world too. So it's a very collective community that we experience here today.
Absolutely. So Bill, maybe you can tell us what we're going to see this afternoon in the program.
Well, we'll see in the program start off. This is the annual general meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association. So to kick us off, the current president of the Harvard Alumni Association, following after John Quincy Adams, who was our first Harvard Alumni Association
Well,
president.
you know, Bill, what we say about John Quincy Adams is we say his job as president of the United States was preparation to be the first president of the Harvard Alumni Association.
Good. Well, that puts Marty Grasso in very, very good company. Marty's a class of '78 graduate and has served Harvard very well over this past year, traveling extensively, sometimes with President Faust. He will start the ceremonies off with his welcome, and then we'll have the traditional singing of Gaudiamus Igitur, which is, and I think appropriately under some circumstances, from Latin origins, a German drinking song for students. And also, for those of you who are familiar with the Latin version of 10,000 Men of Harvard, it is in the third line of that song that the band sings in Latin.
I like the idea of a drinking song because those of you who've been to Harvard commencement or who live in Cambridge know that on commencement day at lunch there is what we call a beer tent. And if anybody goes into that tent, they are served a glass of beer. This tradition dates from the late 17th century when the elders of Harvard College wanted more people to come to commencement, so they decided to serve beer. And that is the tradition today. So I'm glad we have a drinking song that we're going to hear this afternoon.
Gaudiamus Igitur, so let us rejoice. And following that, we'll talk about the recognition of the oldest alumni. We'll have that by Marty Grasso. And then the Chief Marshal will be introduced. Usually doesn't speak, but we may see the Right Honorable Maura T. Healy, who's class of 1992 in her 25th reunion year, introduced to the group. And then after that, the announcement of the election to overseer and Harvard elected director offices will be announced by Marty Grasso, following then with the presentation of the Harvard medals. And I think, Nancy, this has a very special significance today in that we've got a very strong connection to this broadcast and to the Harvard Alumni Association, in that one of the medal recipients, whom we'll talk about later in a little more depth, is Warren Rennie Little. And
Rennie was my co-host of the commencement broadcast for 4 years, and I'm glad to have you here today, Bill, but Rennie actually got a promotion. And now we see on the screen, we see a couple of the shields of Harvard. So throughout the Harvard yard, we see the different shields of the various schools of Harvard. So let's see if we can figure out which ones these are, Bill. Do you see who has the one on the right?
That's the one on the left is the Graduate School of Education.
The one on the left with the, looks like blue cornflowers and white flower in the lower left, that's a Graduate School of Education.
Correct.
And let's see the one with
the other one I can't identify right now, but that could be.
No, it's the Graduate School of Design.
Of course.
It's the Graduate School of Design with the yellow stripes, the red squares, and what looked to me like blue fish. I'm not sure if that's what they are. Anyway, those are the two of the shields. And so if we can pan across the Centenary Theater, we see the shields of all of the schools and of all of the houses at Harvard. And some of these shields date back to the 17th century.
And as we leave the School of Design banner, one of our Harvard medalists today is a graduate of the Harvard School of Design as well. So there you get a picture of what it's like today in Tercentenary Theater. The band is coming in and they're getting ready and they will perform as well.
And now we see this on the left of the screen, you see the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. And then in the middle, let's see, who's in the middle? Which one's in the middle? Oh, it's a Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. And on the right, we have the Radcliffe symbols. So those are some of the shields that today decorate the trees in the Tercentenary Theater.
So maybe a quick distinction, Nancy. Radcliffe and Harvard, how does that connection exist today? What was it like when you were a student?
Well, Radcliffe was started in 1879 as the Society for Instruction of Women, and basically some of Harvard professors and other Bostonians wanted their daughters to be educated, so essentially they hired Harvard professors to give the same lectures to their daughters that these professors gave to Harvard. So there were separate they were somewhat separate institutions, although they had the same professors. Now on the left, you now see the shield from Courier House, which is one of the undergraduate dorms, and the one on the right, which you can't see very well, but it looks like a blue cross with white stars in the middle. That's the shield. There it is. That's the shield of Kirkland House. I guess it's black rather than blue.
Right.
One of the interesting things about the Harvard houses is that the Harvard houses were named after successive presidents of Harvard. So Henry Dunster, Dunster House. Now, it's interesting to know that Nathaniel Eaton was the second president of Harvard, and we don't have an Eaton House because he basically embezzled all the Harvard endowment of the time and absconded back to England with it. So we don't have an Eaton House. The other president who is not honored by a house named after him was a man named Samuel Hoare, H-O-A-R. And I think they decided they didn't want to have a Harvard dorm called the Hoare House.
Oh, that's very interesting. Now, Nancy, just to clarify for some people who are in the audience, I know we have a large number of people in junior common rooms at the houses right now viewing this on live stream. What is a house at Harvard?
A house is essentially a dormitory, what would be called elsewhere. So freshman year, all of the freshmen live in Harvard Yard, and then at the end of freshman year, there's a lottery whereby students are assigned to one of the Harvard houses. And the houses are the place where students live sophomore, junior, senior years. They have their meals there, they have their dorms there. And it's really the administrative center of the Harvard College. So that's really what we call a house. This is the shield of Winthrop House we see right here, which is basically a lion with three red stripes. Winthrop is another of the Harvard undergraduate houses. The house system was modeled after the college system in Oxford and Cambridge universities, and Yale calls them colleges. So Yale has a similar system, and it was started when Abbott Russell Lowell was the president, and Lowell received a gift from Edward Harkness, who was one of John D. Rockefeller's business partners, to start the house system that continues this day.
And we know too that faculty members are typically the heads of those houses.
And yes, and they call them faculty deans, and they are the deans of the houses. It's traditionally the husband and the wife. Sometimes both the husband and the wife are professors. Sometimes it's the wife that's professors. And they are the administrative heads of each of the houses.
And they have a very distinct identity, even though it is by random. They form a community for students at Harvard.
And there's intramural sports, so there's a competition for what's called the Strauss Cup, which is for the house that has the best record in the intramural sports program.
So getting back to the order of proceedings for this afternoon, we've got the welcome, we've got the song, the Chief Marshal introduced, and then the announcement of the election of the overseers, and then the presentation of the Harvard medals, and a salute to the alumni by Marty Grasso, and followed by Harvardiana. And that will be performed by the Harvard University Band that you may be able to hear in the background right now. They're warming up as we speak. Following that, a report to the alumni by President Drew Gilpin-Faust, which is a very important part of the outreach of the university and the connection that the university has to alumni. The assembly then joins in singing Radcliffe, Now We Rise to Greet Thee, followed by the address by the honorand, the lead honorand this morning, Mark Zuckerberg. And then we'll finish off with a rendering of Fair Harvard, written in 1811 by class of 1811, Samuel Gilman composed that. And some of the words have changed over the years. In 1998, for example, the words of Fair Harvard read, "The sons of thy jubilee throng," and they were changed to "We join in thy jubilee throng." And that is a key component of how Harvard and Radcliffe have come together to be Harvard and be one community. And I think it represents very well what that community is doing. And
yes.
that then concludes the meeting, and the meeting adjourns.
Thank you, Bill. Now, as you can hear, the Harvard Band is revving up, and we can see in the background the beginning of the alumni, the 2017 version of our Alumni Parade beginning to form in the old yard. They're the overseers walking down the center aisle under umbrellas.
And what role do we see the overseers play? Maybe we can help clarify that.
The overseers are like a board of directors for the university, and they are elected to 6-year terms. And we will hear this afternoon the names of the newly elected 6 overseers who will take office this summer. This alumni parade dates to the mid-17th century, and so every year we have alumni. There we see the class of 62, the class of 63, the class of 65, etc. And so these brave souls are coming out in the rain to march in the alumni parade.
And we can point out they're starting from the old yard.
They're starting from the old yard, which is where Harvard was founded, into the Tercentenary Theater.
Right.
Now, what the alumni parade, at various times, alumni have written about what the parade was like. So I want to read you, Bill, what Ralph Waldo Emerson of the Harvard class of 1821 wrote in of the alumni parade in 1836, which was the bicentennial celebration of Harvard. So Harvard was founded in 1636, and Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote of the alumni parade in 1836. During Harvard's bicentennial year of 1836, the alumni festivities were particularly exuberant. Cambridge at any time is full of ghosts, but on that day the anointed eye saw the crowd of spirits that mingled with the procession in the vacant spaces, year by year, as the classes proceeded, and then the far longer train of ghosts that followed the company of the men that were before us the college honors and the laurels of this state. The long winding train reaching back into eternity. Bill, every time I read this passage, I get goosebumps, because then I look out to see the ghosts of alumni of 300 and, what is it now? It must be 380 some years of Harvard history there. The ghosts are with us today in the mist and the rain.
Exactly. And Emerson conjures those ghosts and emotes a strong sense of continuity through his words about a community that's about a people and ideas that transcends time. And that's a lot of what we're talking about today. There are a lot of historical aspects of what we do. And it's this sense of community that's renewed by convening in this place, Tercentenary Theater. And it's not always been held in this place. We have over the years, it's been held in different places, and I think since the 40s it's been held in Tercentenary Theater. But prior to that, it was held in the Seaver Quad, which is just to the east of here.
And there we see the age on the drum of one of the Harvard band members who is entertaining us this afternoon and providing the music for the alumni parade.
So Nancy, who makes up the global community today at Harvard?
Harvard has more than 350,000 graduates from around the world. And as we say here in Cambridge, the sun never sets on Harvard, because we have alumni and alumni clubs in more than 180 countries. Students come to Harvard for a year or 2 or 7, depending on the degree program, and then they are alumni for the rest of our lives. So we spend a lot of time and effort connecting alumni via websites, via Harvard Club, via global alumni activities. And as we say, for the Harvard Alumni Association, there are no dues and no escape from this global community. And back to your question about Radcliffe. So it was originally founded in 1879, and then during World War II, there were so many professors who went off to war that it was decided that men and women, so the women who had been taught at Radcliffe and the men who were at Harvard, that professors could teach one class with both men and women. So that was what happened in World War II, and then after World War II, they never went back to the segregated classrooms. In the 60s, early 60s, for the first time, Radcliffe women received a degree that was signed both by the president of Harvard and the president of Radcliffe. So, Bill, I'm sorry to tell you about my diploma is more valuable than yours, because I have 2 president's signatures on mine. And then there was a complete merger that was accomplished in the late 80s and the early 90s. So now when you look out at Harvard, and actually now there are slightly more women than men enrolled in Harvard College, and the numbers throughout the university are approximately 50-50. When people ask me what's the biggest change I've seen at Harvard in my lifetime, I would say, look, see, there we see 4 band members, two young men and 2 young women who are now playing in Harvard band. So that's the biggest change that I've seen since I came to Harvard. So maybe, Bill, you could tell us now about Mark Zuckerberg, our commencement speaker today.
Sure, there's a lot of myth built around Mark Zuckerberg, but I think today we'll hear something from a person who received an honorary degree this morning some 15 years after landing in Cambridge in 2002 as a member originally of the class of 2006. Never ultimately to graduate, but received his degree today. As a freshman, he lived in Strauss Hall, for all of those out there who are watching, in room D11, and then for a year in Kirkland House in room C33, which is then famously a place where he conceived of Facebook. Again, partly myth, partly reality. And it was in Kirkland House that he started this social network forum called The Facebook at the time, based on the hard copy and clearly a 20th century technology book that pictured Harvard freshmen. He left after his sophomore year and moved to Palo Alto to continue with his colleagues the development of the Facebook platform, and did not return to Harvard as a student subsequently. Now, importantly, Drew Faust has said about 2 of Harvard's famous technology dropouts, Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, that Harvard should provide a transformational experience, and that both of these people needed a place to drop out from. So it's a key component of understanding some of the dynamic at Harvard, and I think what we see today, and hopefully we'll hear from Mark Zuckerberg today, is his influence and his wealth have grown as he's become, as his influence and wealth have grown, he's become an advocate for philanthropy, and he generously supports his philanthropic ideals with his wife Priscilla Chan, who's class of Harvard 2007, celebrating her 10th reunion this year. And Priscilla's also a pediatrician, and they have taken on a very active role in the area of philanthropy. What I hope he talks about today, Nancy, are his new focus, building global community. And this was the subject of his February 2017 treatise, challenging himself and others to move beyond connecting and on to creating community. And in a sense of community, we heard Joe Biden, who was the class day speaker yesterday for the Harvard class of 2017, say that he and Mark Zuckerberg have a lot in common. First of all, neither of them have the Harvard degree, until today, of course. And secondly, together, they have a combined net worth of about $62 billion, which got a laugh from the crowd, quite understandably. Now, from a Harvard freshman in 2002 to our stage today, Mark Zuckerberg has helped create and change the shape of how we understand social network, and how, I hope we'll hear today, we move to more community. And as he stands in the shoes of George Marshall stood here 70 years ago, in 1947, and in a mere 12-minute speech, set the reconstruction of Europe in motion and changed the course of 20th century history. And I think to a certain extent we see that in some of the people that we bring to the stage at Harvard, understanding that they are people who can change the world.
Another commencement speech that I remember well was that of J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter books, and she actually addressed the crowd and talked about failure, what it was like to fail, and preparing Harvard students who are people who are generally not used to failing, but talking to them about how failure always opens doors. And I know there were lots of people who were hoping for a Quidditch match to happen in the yard, but unfortunately that didn't happen the day J.K. Rowling was here.
Not at that point. And also Bill Gates 10 years ago had a very profound speech about having promised his mother that he would come back to Harvard. And his mother had passed away in the interim, but he was able to say to his father, "I did it." But his message that day, 10 years ago, was about understanding how to connect to people with whom he had no personal contact. So his focus on philanthropy was about how does he get his influence to help people he doesn't even know. And I would call that a transformational event. that we can take some credit for, that Harvard helped give him a base for that in his time here.
As you talk about that, it reminds me of the Class Day speech yesterday that Vice President Joe Biden gave. The Class Day festivities happen on Wednesdays. Commencement is on Thursday, but on Wednesday at the various schools, the schools themselves just have a speaker. So Harvard College chose Joe Biden, invited Joe Biden to give the speech, and he actually challenged the graduating seniors to engage in public service, because he said even though this seems like for many people this seems like a dark political time, and the tendency would be to want to disengage rather than engage, he challenged these seniors to engage because they are the people who can change the world.
And it wasn't an empty challenge he talked about. He grew up and graduated from college in 1968 at the height of the protests, at the height of the problems with the Vietnam War, expecting within months that the war would be over, and in fact it went on for another 5 years. And he talked about that in very personal terms, about how profoundly that affected his move to get into and become involved in politics. And I think that was a message that was clearly aimed at those to say, even though the times may feel like they're difficult now, it is the time to engage. And it was a powerful message to some of our undergraduates who were sitting in the audience yesterday.
And as we see here, another view of the Harvard Band, which continues to play to entertain us. The Tercentenary Theater is beginning to fill up with alumni and other attendees who are waiting to hear.
And we can see behind them, too, is the Commencement Choir. So the band and the Commencement Choir both perform, and they're luckily under the cover of rain. And it's a very profound contribution that these undergraduates make to the whole ceremony of commencement and the afternoon exercises.
And as we look out into the theater, we do see the 25th reunion class being led by the bagpipes. And the 25th reunion class will be sitting on the stage today for the afternoon exercises. As you look out at the theater, you see men wearing top hats. Bill, this is how we organize commencement. There's a volunteer committee of alumni, approximately 75 alumni. The men wear hats and the women wear hats that I'm proud to say I actually designed, so that you know who is someone who might know where the restrooms are or where to go for this or that part of the event. So as we look out, we call ourselves the Top Hats because, as you can see, this is the women's version of the Top Hats. You see in the yard the men's version of the top hats. This committee dates back to the 1850s when fewer people were coming to commencement. So they decided to appoint a committee of alumni to organize commencement, to play traffic cop in the yard. But they also decided that year to revive the tradition of serving alcohol at commencement. So we say it's because we have the top hats that people now come to commencement, but I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. So as you can see, I have my name tag. It says Happy Observance of Commencement with my name on it. And I also have, to designate me as one of the women on the Happy Committee, a rosette that we call the La Follette Rosette. It is designed by Ellen La Follette of the great class of 1954 after the kind of decoration that Revolutionary War soldiers wore on their tri-cornered hats. So this is the rosette, this is the name tag, and there is the top hat.
And I think the Marshals who are involved and also organized by your Happy Committee have roles to play. This morning, for example, I helped usher the business school grads and law school grads and Kennedy School grads into their seats in Tercentenary Theater. And I have to tell you, the mood was very positive. Despite the dampened weather, the mood was so positive on this very important day that culminates years of work and academic effort. And you could get a sense of community in how they're marching into the theater.
I never cease to be amazed. This is my 33rd commencement. Imagine that. And there have been 5 or 6 where it's rained. And I always wake up in the morning and think, oh my gosh, it's raining. What's going to happen? But everybody is so happy. Everybody is celebrating. It almost doesn't matter that it's actually
you can
raining.
You can see now Nancy, on the stage is starting to fill up. Who are we seeing on stage just in general? Who are the people we'd look to be?
Well, let's see who we can see here.
Well, I think we've got overseers will ultimately be sitting there.
Overseers will be there. The members of the corporation, which is really the governing body of the university. On the left, you see Paul Finnegan, who is the treasurer of Harvard. He sits on the corporation. Then you see Cynthia Torres, who is the former president of the Alumni Association. So it's those kinds of dignitaries who will be sitting up there, as well as the chairs of the reunion. So every 5 years, Harvard holds reunions, and there is a reunion program committee and a reunion gift committee. And the chairs of those committees are also invited to sit up on the stage for the afternoon exercises.
And I think one of the things you'll see up there are also the honorary degree recipients and the Harvard Award, the Harvard Medal recipients will be up there today. And among them are Henry Cobb, who I mentioned before is a graduate of the School of Architecture, but also an undergraduate class of 47 and graduated with a degree in architecture in 1949. And he's been called a visionary architect with an eye for building community that's helped shape Harvard both physically and pedagogically as a designer, a writer, an educator, a leader, and help formulate the Graduate School of Design.
Let me tell you about the shield.
Oh, sure.
The shield on the right with the 3 rabbits is Leverett House. I lived in Leverett House, and those of us who live in Leverett House, we call ourselves bunnies. So just so you know, I'm a bunny. And to the left of Leverett House is Cabot House. It has 3 fish, yellow background with 3 fish. And there goes the umbrella over the other 2, so I can't quite see which ones those are.
Right,
but again, we have the shields of the houses there to lend a more festive atmosphere here in Harvard.
And there you see the 25th reunion banner.
Yes.
As we mentioned before, they will be sitting on stage as well, stage left and stage right. There's a very important reunion. 25th reunion is when a lot of families
get back. Here are the members of the 25th reunion class walking in now under their umbrellas.
Still some smiles there.
Yes.
Still some smiles. So the other 2 Harvard medal winners are A. Clayton Spencer, who's an AM 82 graduate, who worked tirelessly for the university in many different capacities, and she's been described as having a quiet conviction and a selfless humility that belies a fierce commitment to higher education. She's served 4 Harvard presidents and provided a driving force and steady hand behind transformational university moments, including the Harvard-Radcliffe merger and the launch of the Crimson Summer Academy, including, Nancy, and I think it's interesting, the expansion of financial aid, which has been critical to developing the future of Harvard's student body, is understanding financial aid.
Yeah, she helped Larry Summers develop the financial aid program, whereby families whose combined income is less than a certain amount of money, they don't have to pay anything. So it's really the most generous financial aid program in the country right now, and she was the architect of that program.
And again, a profound impact on the Harvard community. And our 3rd medal winner, Harvard medal winner, is your former co-host Warren Rennie Little, whose class of 1955, who's been described as being a dedicated volunteer, a poetic orator, and I think we can both attest to that, a mentor to many and a friend to all, with a keen sense of both history and humor. And he's carried the baton for his class, Crimson Athletics, and the entire Harvard community, equally comfortable in a top hat and tails at commencement, or in his famous raccoon coat at the game every year. He's always known to wear his H on his sleeve. And I think that's a fitting testimony to Rennie and his energy that he's brought to the Harvard community over the years.
Bill, I was thrilled when I heard that Rennie would be receiving the Harvard medal, because he not only has he accomplished so much for his class and for Harvard, but he's been a role model to people like me who come into the Alumni Association, aren't quite sure what we do, and he would always put his arm around us and help us learn the ropes and help us understand what it means to be a Harvard alumni leader. So I'm just thrilled for Rennie and for the other Harvard medalists this afternoon.
Right, and we'll also see overseers and the announcement of the election of the overseers results, and also the HAA board of directors, elected directors. There'll be 6 of those elected. I can tell you, though, that the new overseers as you mentioned before, who are elected by all alumni for 6-year terms will be Paul Choi from Chicago, Mariano Florentino Cuellar, Darian Driver, Carla Harris, and Leslie Tolbert. So this is a very diverse group of people from background, from age, from demographic. And I think it helps to further reflect how Harvard's become a more diverse place.
And we want to congratulate all 6 of the new overseers. Bill, you talked a little while ago about Mark Zuckerberg finally receiving a degree from Harvard this morning. And there were 10 honorary degree recipients this morning. But first, I want to give a little bit of history about that. The first Harvard honorary degree recipient dates back to 1753, and it is the name of a person we all know well, Benjamin Franklin, who actually was born in Boston. He wanted to attend Harvard, but his father had neither the money nor the interest in furthering his son's education. So Franklin got on a boat, went to Philadelphia, started a printing press, and then he started his scientific experiments. So in 1753, he was awarded the first honorary degree from Harvard for his experiments related to electricity. So we think of him now as one of our founding fathers, which he was later on, but he received his honorary degree for his scientific experiments. The first woman to receive an honorary degree was Helen Keller. Helen Keller actually attended Radcliffe College, the class of 1904, and she then received an honorary degree in 1955. And I want to read you a little bit about the citation from the honorary degree, which is, "From a still dark world, she has brought us light and sound. Our lives are richer for her faith and her example." So today, among the honorary degree recipients, we had James Earl Jones, the actor, who at the end of the morning exercises got up to the microphone and said he had a message for all the graduates, and he said, "May the force be with you." Of course, I can't quite imitate his voice, Bill,
nobody can, Nancy.
Right. And Mark Zuckerberg received an honorary degree this morning. Dame Judi Dench, the actress, the British actress, was here for an honorary degree. Walter Massey, who was a physicist, a business entrepreneur, and an educator. Norman Augenstein, an aeronautical engineer, former head of Lockheed Martin. Oh, and here we see a photo of this. Now we see Maura Healey, who is the chief marshal. You can see she has her chief marshal insignia on, and she is wearing one of the Harvard commencement hats that
And
I
the stage
designed.
is filling as we speak.
The stage is filling as we speak. It can't be long until we start. The other honorary degree recipients included Dr. Huda Zogby, who's a pediatrician, a neurologist, and a geneticist. Imagine combining all 3 of those professions into one. And John Williams, the composer, conductor, and musician who composed the music for many of the films that we all know and love. Sandra Gilbert, who is a retired professor as well as a writer and a feminist, received an honorary degree, and Professor Michael Rabin, who is a scientist and mathematician. So it's quite a distinguished group of honorary degree recipients. And the last one was Hawa Abdi Diblawe, who is a Somalian human rights activist and physician.
And again, I think this reflects a very diverse group of people. And these people come to their honorary degrees through a committee of faculty members who debate debate about whom to have as recipients of these honorary degrees, and then of course approved by the corporation. I think for me, Nancy, it's emblematic of part of the progression of Harvard that Drew Faust has helped to implement, is that we see a number of people from the performing arts represented. And it does exemplify Drew Gilpin Faust's approach to education being more than the academics. It's more holistic than the sole academic experience, and expands into performing arts as a way not just to express, but as a way to think differently and see from different perspectives and have those transformational experiences.
Yes, it's very true. She started the Harvard, the humanities program, appointed the first dean of humanities. Oh, there's the bagpipes that have accompanied the 25th reunion class. Somehow, Bill, I don't think it would be Harvard commencement if we don't hear the bagpipes.
I think you're right.
It's interesting when you look out at Harvard Harvard Yard, and you see the bagpipes. And so what I'm going to tell you a little bit about other commencement celebrations. In the 18th century, in the late 18th century, for several years in a row, there were elephants and mermaids in Harvard Yard as part of the Harvard celebration.
Beyond just ghosts.
Right. I think we won't see any elephants or mermaids today. But that would be fun. And also, Bill, I don't know if you know this, but the charter of Harvard states that any citizen of Cambridge can come into Harvard Yard and graze their livestock in Harvard Yard. So I live in Cambridge, so one year I'm going to show up with some sheep. Unfortunately, I don't have any sheep. I don't know if the charter includes being able to rent sheep to come bring into Harvard Yard. But one year I want to come in and bring my sheep so they can graze in Harvard Yard on commencement morning. So there have been quite a number of celebrations over the years, and I want to read about what happened in the commencements between 1680 and 1708. Between the morning and afternoon exercises, commencement dinner was served in the college hearth at the expense of those taking degrees. So that means the graduates had to pay for the food for the governing boards, the alumni returning, and strangers. The president opened the feast by craving a blessing, and at the end gave thanks. Then the company sang a psalm, and there was the pleasant old ceremony of handing around the loving cup, or grace cup, as it was called then. So that's a little bit different. It sounds like a little more intimate celebration than what we have today, but it is interesting to look over the years at the very different people who came. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the first commencement, which, as I said, was in 1642. So on that day, there were 9 graduates, along with several undergraduates, and an audience of visitors from Boston, ministers, Indians, residents, parents, and gloating familiars. The people made it a holiday of annual joy and learning. So it is a holiday of annual joy and learning. And then there were orations by the graduates in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. We had a Latin oration this morning. We still have that tradition. And then in the afternoon came the series of disputations in Latin between the graduates on the topics of philosophy and philology. So that must have been a really interesting time. And again, 1642, that was the first commencement here at Harvard.
Well, I think that even as time went on, if we looked at what happened in the 18th century, Harvard commencement then became well known in literature and lore, and a poem, in fact, entitled "The Satirical Description of Commencement" commenced and described the scene, and in the way they said, all sizes in each sect the ways do throng, the black and white ride jib by Joel along, the nut brown country nymphs and rural swains appear there on this celebrated day. So again, evoking very strong visual and sensual ideas is that.
And finally, I want to read what Peter Gomes, a Nathan Pusey minister at Memorial Church, who sadly passed away in 2011. He was also the Plummer Professor of Christian Morals. And this is what he wrote about Harvard commencement. And he was here for more than 40 years, so he saw many a commencement and indeed gave the baccalaureate service to those graduating seniors. Here is what he wrote. Someone, observing the rather casual dignity of the day, remarked that commencement is more like a lawn party than a ballet, and a less charitable but more astute observer suggested that the vast assemblage in formation in the old yard was very much like that of a wonderfully chaotic game of croquet with flamingos and hedgehogs in Alice in Wonderland. Well, again, I don't see any flamingos or hedgehogs today, but there's a certain analogy there. First-time visitors to the scene are rather horrified at what appears to be rank confusion. I think we do seem to have a little confusion out there today, mostly because of the rain. But then they remember that this is, after all, Harvard, where conformity, even of self-preservation, has been elevated to the rank of an original sin. That commencement works at all is a tribute to patience and goodwill and the general sense that, come what may, the day is to be enjoyed. And indeed, even though people may look a little soggy out there, we do hear lots of happy voices and we see lots of smiles, both on the stage as well as in the audience this afternoon.
And I think maybe to delve into some of the esoteric aspects of Harvard, one of the things people ask is why the color crimson? And essentially it comes from, there are a number of different sources for the idea of crimson being the color that's representative of Harvard. But in 1858, a crew race of Harvard rowers had them feature red bandanas. And that then became, was chosen by the future President Charles W. Eliot as the color to use. And then that evolved in the 1860s and 1870s when the student body voted for red, and the newspaper, in fact, in 1870s changed its name from magenta to the Harvard Crimson. So there are those kinds of aspects, and I know that athletics plays a role in many of the students. Harvard has the most number of varsity sports of any Division I college in the United States. So very supportive of the athletic endeavors of students. And it may surprise you, though, the etymology of the term Ivy League, which today has become noted for a certain number of colleges in the northeast of the U.S., really started in the 1950s when there were 4 colleges, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Dartmouth, that were bound together and designated as a league, and that they called the 4 League, designated by the Roman numeral IV. So those Roman numerals then became a very easy and quick way to describe that group, and it evolved into Ivy League. So what we now know as 8 different colleges in the northeast of the U.S. started off as the 4, and then became the idea of it was a group of colleges that would compete against each other athletically.
The Ivy League was the first athletic conference in the United States, and the colleges in the Ivy League were started out being Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Dartmouth. Bill, people often ask me, why is commencement on a Thursday? Why is it not on a Saturday and Sunday?
Commencement was originally held in September, but over the centuries, these festivities moved earlier and earlier in the year. And because of calendar reform at Harvard, classes now start earlier than ever. The Wednesday before Labor Day classes start. That means that commencement, always being held on the 38th Thursday after the beginning of the fall term, falls today on May 25th. But why Thursday? Well, in the 19th century, athletic contests were added to the annual commencement and alumni festivities, and these contests had to be coordinated with our arch rivals from New Haven, Yale, and Yale commencement was always on a Monday. The baseball contests were on Wednesday, the crew races on Friday, which left only Thursday for the commencement exercises. So some pretty simple, but maybe arcane reasons.
So as we mentioned, Joe Biden was this Class Day speaker here at Harvard College yesterday. And it was amazing, Bill. There were 35,000 people who came to listen to Joe Biden exhort the seniors to get involved with public service.
Well, and I think he made an appeal to American students, but also to the international community, that this is a time to engage for the full international community we have. And in fact, if we looked out over Harvard, as recently as 2 years ago, we know that there were over 13,000 alumni in China. And after that, my bias then here being shown at the second in the most number of alumni, 5,600 alumni from Canada alone. And then if we took the EU, so separating out, putting the countries together, and took the European Union, there are over 20,000 alumni in the European Union. So this is a powerful group. Oh yes, there's a good picture for us.
On the left of the screen, we see Nan Cohane, the former president of Wellesley College, the former president of Duke University, who is a member of the corporation. She is talking to Bill Lee, who is the chairman of the corporation. Bill is a partner at one of the major law firms in downtown Boston. You can tell the men who are members of the corporations or overseers because they have the red roses, crimson roses, excuse me, the crimson
yes.
roses attached to their lapels. We see that the stage is almost full of people. It looks like the parade is almost over. So in a few minutes, we will see Marty Grasso come to the podium to call our meeting to order. But in the meantime, let's talk about some of the other Class Day speakers yesterday. At the Kennedy School, the Kennedy School of Government, John Kerry, who was the 68th Secretary of State of the United States, gave an address to the graduates at the Kennedy School. At the medical school and the School of Dental Medicine, they have a combined commencement. This afternoon, the speaker there will be George Daly, who is a graduate of Harvard College as well as Harvard Medical School. He is the outgoing dean of Harvard Medical School. He will be giving the address there. And now we see more of the dignitaries on the stage. We see Mark Goodhart in the center, who's secretary to the Harvard Corporation. We see more of the top hats there. We hear the bagpipes playing again. I think that's probably a prelude to the call to order. At the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, Gina McCarthy, who was the former administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, addressed the graduates. At Harvard Law School, Sally Yates, the former Deputy Attorney General of the United States, who has recently been in the news, she addressed the Harvard Law School graduates. At the design school, we had a woman, Catherine Farley, who was the managing director of Tishman Speyer, one of the major architectural firms in the world, and she is also a graduate of the design school. Tomorrow, the Radcliffe Institute will award the Radcliffe Medal to Judy Woodruff, the journalist and NPR television news host, and posthumously to Gwen Ifill. The award was announced last fall, and sadly Gwen Ifill passed away soon afterwards, but she will also be remembered tomorrow. So one of the great things about the Harvard Commencement, it's really several days of celebrations of graduation, celebrations of achievement in, as you said, in the arts, in the sciences, in computer science, in law, in politics, in medicine, in business. So it's really a remarkable several days of activities. And I have to say, Bill, on days like yesterday and today, I wish I were 5 people so I could attend all the various interesting ceremonies. We now have a good look out into the theater, which a few minutes ago was empty, and now it is filling up. Keep in mind that the undergraduates and that the seniors who graduated this morning, as well as some of the graduates from the graduate schools, will be coming. And what usually happens is by the time of the commencement speaker rises to give his speech, the theater is rather full because everybody has gathered from various other places around the university.
We could also mention that the morning commencement ceremony has the deans of each of the representative schools presenting the group of students to the president for commendation. The students then move to their specific schools, and in the case of the undergraduates, to their specific houses, where then who do you see there?
There's Clayton Spencer in the gray suit standing up. She is one of the Harvard medalists.
Right. And one of the things that will happen at each one of the different houses is the students will receive their individual diplomas in a ceremony that's more personalized and that is very touching for family members to be very connected to what the students are doing at the house. And many of them will likely sit there today, Nancy, in the rain and enjoy this ceremony from the comfort of a dry place.
So there we see the dignitaries. Again, there's Bill Lee again, the chairman of the corporation, and some of the other dignitaries that we have here.
And despite what may seem to be, and as you referred to below earlier, as a reasonably organized chaos, people do have designated places to sit, and both on the stage and in the seats. And there's provision made for family members to be able to partake in this or afternoon exercises of the Alumni Association as well.
You notice that we call it Harvard Commencement. We don't call it Harvard Graduation. So the word commencement comes from incipio, which means beginning. And as I said, the first commencement was in 1642. Bill, there is the bell from Memorial Church signaling the beginning of our afternoon.
So we'll wait for Marty Grasso, class of 1978.
There is Marty approaching the podium. And we will now end our commentary, and we will pick it up again after the program has been completed. So we hope you enjoy the ceremony, the speeches, and the view of Harvard's 366 commencement. Sometimes people ask me, how come it's 366 commencements
Sure.
and not, what would it be, 388, I guess the number would be? It's because not only were there, Harvard was founded in 1636, the first commencement was 1642, but in the early years, if there was no graduate, no scholar who completed his studies, they didn't hold a commencement. And then during the Revolution, for 4 or 5 years, there were no commencements at all because Harvard suspended classes. The dorms here in the old yard were actually used to house the Continental troops. So there were a number of years during that time where there were no graduations.
And I think we may have a few minutes because it appears in the crowd that there's some people still trying to find seats. But I notice as we look at the crowd on the stage that they're preparing for what should be a very interesting program. When we look at Drew Faust now approaching the stage and talking with Mark Goodhart.
Yes.
And I noticed before talking with Marty Grasso is Dean Michael Smith, who is also on the stage. So there's a representation of Harvard's academic community as well as its alumni community at these afternoon exercises.
There's President Faust sitting in the front row.
And their center screen in the white coat is Susan Morris Novick, who will be the president of the Harvard Alumni Association next year and will hold the gavel at this meeting when we convene again in a year.
And there is Jack Reardon next to Marty Grasso. Jack Reardon was the longtime executive director of the Harvard Alumni Association, and the man in the crimson robe is the new executive director, Philip Lovejoy.
Interesting with the robes, I get asked, what is the origin of those robes? And apparently, in medieval times, the scholars sat in very damp and cold areas, much like today, but in buildings. And they used to cut holes in blankets to keep warm. They put their heads through, and those holes then formed a robe around them. And that's the origins of these multicolored regalia that we see, the academic regalia that we see, and we saw Philip Lovejoy.
The man we see in the center with the beard is Alan Garber, the provost of the university, a graduate of your class.
And now Marty Grasso.
Now Marty Grasso will call us to order. So we will return at the end of the afternoon.
I took all the pages out. Sit together. Jim, and it's great to see you too. Well, this will be a good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon, President Faust, members of the Harvard Corporation, the Board of Overseers, members of the faculty, honored guests, fellow alumni, new graduates, friends, my beautiful and supportive family. Welcome to the 148th meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association. My name is Marty Grasso. I am from Swampscott, Massachusetts, and I'm a member of the Harvard College class of 1978. As the 138th president of the Harvard Alumni Association, in accordance with the tradition set by our very first Alumni Association President John Quincy Adams, class of 1787, I raise this gavel and call this meeting to order. The Harvard Alumni Association warmly welcomes all of you who have graduated today, the college reunion classes, and all of the other alumni families and friends who have made it here today and gathered for the happy observance of commencement. We also welcome all of the brilliant Harvard alumni who have decided to watch this program online, the simulcast today. Welcome to all of you as well. Today, I'd like to reflect a little bit on the traditions that we observe at commencement. Why do we observe these long-held traditions? For me, the reason to respect and observe these traditions is very simple and straightforward. Observing our traditions is a proven method of understanding the way we are, affirming the way we are, and hopefully giving us some insight into the way we are becoming. And today, my friends, it is my opinion that we are observing our most meaningful and joyous of traditions as we join together to pull that very long thread of our shared history and experience through that wise eye of the big needle that we call Harvard. By engaging in this exercise, we produce the tool that we use once every year on this joyous occasion to stitch an exquisite addition to our alumni tapestry that sustains and, I would argue, identifies our very institution. And so, my friends, without further ado, I say to you in traditional Latin, hoc lets adepto quepe ludens pars, which in the contemporary English idiom translates to, let's get this rejoicing party started. I can't think of a better way to do that than to acknowledge the presence of two very special alumni who represent the long arc of our communal HAA experience, sitting right here on the stage with us. Leading the Radcliffe alumnae today is Rhoda Lesser Diamond, class of 1942, who turned 96 this March. From the Harvard College class of 1940, Leon Starr will celebrate his 99th birthday in June and led the Harvard alumni this afternoon. Thank you so very much to Rhoda and Leon for leading our Alumni Parade. It is an honor to celebrate with you today. Your many years of participation in the Harvard Alumni Association are a great reminder for our new graduates that their Harvard experience is just beginning. And indeed, your presence here today is truly a reason for us to rejoice. Nearly 900 members from the great Harvard College class of 1992 In case anyone didn't notice, the class of 92 is sitting right on the stage behind me here. Is here, and that's a remarkable turnout, 92. It is now my privilege to present a distinguished member of the class of 1992, elected by her classmates to serve as our Chief Marshal of Commencement Proceedings today. I am very pleased and honored to introduce the Honorable Maura T. Healey, Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Okay, here we go again. And now, will the entire 25th reunion class please stand and take a bow? Seems pretty clear that the folks from the class of 1992 need no formal training in the art of rejoicing. Well done. On July 1st, I will pass the torch of HAA leadership to one of the Harvard Alumni Association's most active and committed supporters. A member of the Harvard College class of 1985, my successor and most importantly dear friend, has served as president of the Harvard Club of Long Island and as the HAA vice president of university-wide alumni affairs, in addition to many other roles on the HAA's board of directors over the years. Madam President-elect Susan Morris Novick, will you please stand? Each year at commencement, we recognize the winners of the Harvard Medals. Created in 1981, the Harvard Medals are the highest honors awarded by the university and recognize individuals who have given extraordinary service to Harvard. This year's 3 recipients, who are all with us today, merit this recognition for their exemplary and truly inspirational commitment to our university. Your commencement program describes the many ways in which the 2017 Harvard Medal winners have enriched the university with their service. President Faust will read the citations, and I ask that each of you, each of the medalists please stand as your name is announced.
Henry N. Cobb, visionary architect with an eye for building community. You have helped shape Harvard both physically and pedagogically as a designer, writer, educator, and leader for the Graduate School of Design, enhancing the beauty of the built environment on campus and around the world with works of subtle elegance and profound eloquence.
Warren Masters Little, dedicated volunteer, poetic orator, mentor to many, and friend to all with a keen sense of history and humor. You have selflessly carried the baton for your class, Crimson athletes, and the entire Harvard community. Equally comfortable in a top hat and tails at commencement or a raccoon coat at the game, and always wearing your H on your sleeve. Rennie Little. Clayton Spencer, with conviction and humility that underscore your fierce commitment to higher education. You have served as an astute and forthright advisor to 4 Harvard presidents, providing the driving force and steady hand behind transformational university moments, including the launch of the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study, the creation of the Crimson Summer Academy, and the expansion of financial aid. Clayton Spencer.
If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. Those are the words of 6th President of the United States, and most relevant to our event proceedings today, the very first president of the Harvard Alumni Association, John Quincy Adams. I would observe that during her tenure as Harvard's 28th president, Drew Gilpin Faust has lived up to each of these leadership criterion in ways that would certainly make President Adams very proud and honored to be standing in my shoes today. Those of you who know me know that I could stand up here for many minutes and recount the ways that President Faust has fulfilled each of Adams's criteria for leadership. However, I would like to just share with you my personal experience with President Faust in the Adams category that requires leaders to motivate their followers to become more. One of the things that I have found most satisfying during my 10 years of HAA board service is the opportunity to speak with recent graduates of the college and the graduate schools that have joined the ranks of the Harvard Alumni Association after experiencing Harvard during President Faust's tenure. I have found these recent graduates to be highly self-aware, thoughtful individuals who are convinced that their Harvard experience has been one of their most profound self-discovery period in their lives, and has made them more confident in their ability to not only advance their personal goals, but to really feel as though they are ready to make a meaningful contribution to society. Indeed, this is what it has meant to be a student at Harvard during the tenure of Drew Faust. During this past year, I've had the privilege of traveling throughout the world to meet with our alumni and listen to President Faust articulate her current view of Harvard's role in the world and her vision for Harvard's future. And after having had this experience, I have never been more convinced than I am presently that there is no better person on this planet that is capable of leading this university today and hopefully long into the future than Drew Gilpin Faust, whom I am so proud and honored to be able to welcome to the podium. Came right from the heart.
Good afternoon. My remarks at this moment in our commencement rituals are officially titled A Report to the Alumni. The first time I delivered them in 2008, I was the only obstacle between all of you and J.K. Rowling. I looked out on a sea of eager children, costume Dumbledores, and Quidditch brooms waving impatiently in the air. Today, you await Mark Zuckerberg, whose wizardry takes a different form, one that has changed the world. And although he doesn't seem to have inspired an outbreak of hoodies, we certainly do have some costumes in this audience today. I see we're now handing out blankets. This is a day of joy and celebration, of happy endings and new beginnings, of families and friends, of achievements and hopes. It is also a day when we as a university perform our most important annual ritual, affirming once again the purposes that animate us and the values that direct and inspire us. I want to speak today about one of the most important and in recent months most contested of these values. It is one that has provoked debate, dissent, confrontation, and even violence on campuses across the country, and one that has attracted widespread public attention and criticism. I am, of course, talking about issues of free speech on university campuses. The meaning and limits of free speech are questions deeply embedded in our legal system, in interpretations of the First Amendment and its applications. I am no constitutional lawyer, indeed no lawyer at all, and I do not intend in my brief remarks today to address complex legal doctrines, nor clearly can I, in a few brief minutes, take on even a fraction of the arguments that have been advanced on this issue. Instead, I speak as one who has been a university president for a decade in order to raise three questions. First, why is free speech so important to and at universities? Second, why does it seem under special challenge right now? And third, how might we better address these challenges by moving beyond just defensively protecting free speech, which of course we must do, to actively and affirmatively enabling it and nurturing environments in which it can thrive. So first, why is free speech so important to and at universities? This is a question I took up with the newly arrived first-year students in the college when I welcomed them at convocation last fall. For centuries, I told them universities have been environments in which knowledge has been discovered, collected, studied, debated, expanded, changed, and advanced through the power of rational argument and exchange. We pursue truth unrelentingly, but we must never be so complacent as to believe we have unerringly attained it. Veritas is inspiration and aspiration. We assume there is always more to know and discover, so we open ourselves to challenge and change. We must always be ready to be wrong. So being part of a university community requires courage and humility. Universities must be places open to the kind of debate that can change ideas and committed to standards of reason and evidence that form the bases for evaluating them. Silencing ideas or basking in intellectual orthodoxy independent of facts and evidence impedes our access to new and better ideas, and it inhibits a full and considered rejection of bad ones. From at least the time of Galileo, we can see how repressing seemingly heretical ideas has blinded societies and nations to enhanced knowledge and understanding on which progress depends. Far more recently, we can see here at Harvard how our inattentiveness to the power and appeal of conservative voices left much of our community astonished, blindsided by the outcome of last fall's election. We must work to ensure that universities do not become bubbles isolated from the concerns and discourse of the society that surrounds them. Universities must model a commitment to the notion that truth cannot simply be claimed, but must be established. Established through reasoned argument, assessment, and even sometimes uncomfortable challenges that provide the foundation for truth. The legitimacy of universities' claim to be sources and validators of fact depends on our willingness to actively and vigorously defend those facts. And we must remember that limiting some speech opens the dangerous possibility that the speech that is ultimately censored may be our own. If some words are to be treated as equivalent to physical violence and silenced or even prosecuted, who is to decide which words? Freedom of expression, as Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes famously said long ago, protects free thought for those who agree with us, but not only free thought for those who agree with us, but freedom for the thought we hate. We need to hear those hateful ideas so our society is fully equipped to oppose and defeat them. Over the years, differences about the implementation of the university's free speech principles have often provoked controversy, and we haven't always gotten it right. As long ago as 1939, an invitation from a student group to the head of the American Communist Party generated protest, and the invitation was ultimately canceled by the corporation. Bertrand Russell's appointment as William James lecturer just a year later divided the corporation, but President Conant broke the tie and Russell came. Campus conflicts over invited speakers are hardly new. Yet the vehemence with which these issues have been debated in recent months, not just on campuses but in the broader public sphere, suggests there is something distinctive about this moment. Certainly, these controversies reflect a highly polarized political and social environment, perhaps the most divisive since the era of the Civil War. And in these already fractious circumstances, free speech debates have provided a fertile substrate into which anger and disagreement could be planted to nourish partisan outrage and generate media clickbait. But that is only a partial explanation. Universities themselves have changed dramatically in recent years, reaching beyond their traditional, largely homogeneous populations to become more diverse than perhaps any other institution in which Americans find themselves living together. Once overwhelmingly white, male, Protestant, and upper class, Harvard College is now half female, majority minority, religiously pluralistic, with nearly 60% of students able to attend because of financial aid. "15% are the first in their families to go to college. Many of our students struggle to feel full members of this community, a community in which people like them have so recently arrived. They seek evidence and assurance that, to borrow the title of a powerful theatrical piece created by a group of our African American students, evidence and assurance that they too are Harvard. The price of our commitment to freedom of speech is paid disproportionately by these students. For them, free speech has not infrequently included enduring a questioning of their abilities, their humanity, their morality, their very legitimacy here. Our values and our theory of education rest on the assumption that members of our community will take the risk of speaking and will actively compete in our wild rumpus of argument and ideas. It requires them as well to be fearless in face of argument or challenge or even verbal insult. And it expects that fearlessness even when the challenge is directed to the very identity, race, religion, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, nationality, that may have made them uncertain about their right to be here in the first place. Demonstrating such fearlessness is hard. No one should be mocked as a snowflake for finding it so. Hard. Hard, but important and attainable. Attainable, we believe, for every member of our community. But the price of free speech cannot be charged just to those most likely to become its target. We must support and empower the voices of all the members of our community and nurture the courage and humility that our commitment to unfettered debate demands from all of us. And that courage means not only resilience in face of challenge or attack, but strength to speak out against injustices directed at others as well. Free speech does not just happen and require intervention when it is impeded. It is not about the freedom to outshout others while everyone has their fingers in their ears. For free speech to flourish, we must build an environment where everyone takes responsibility for the right not just to speak, but to hear and be heard, where everyone assumes the responsibility to treat others with dignity and respect. It requires not just speakers, but in the words of James Ryan, Dean of our Graduate School of Education, generous listeners. Amidst the current soul-searching about free speech, we need to devote more attention to establishing the conditions in which everyone's speech is encouraged and taken seriously. Ensuring freedom of speech is not just about allowing speech. It is about actively creating a community where everyone can contribute and flourish, a community where argument is relished, not feared. Freedom of speech is not just freedom from censorship. It is freedom to actively join the debate as a full participant. It is about creating a context in which genuine debate can happen. Talk a lot, I urged the class of 2020 last fall. Listen more. Don't stand safely on the sidelines. Take the risk of being wrong. It is the best way to learn and grow. And build a culture of generous listening so that others may be emboldened to take risks too. A community in a shared search for veritas. That is the ideal for which Harvard must strive. We need it now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that inspirational speech, President Faust. Your leadership is another great reason for us to rejoice on this special day. To honor the contributions of Radcliffe College and its alumni, and to mark its historical significance for men and women alike, please stand and join in singing Radcliffe, Now We Rise to Greet Thee. The words are in your program. Thank you all. Your voices had some lovely liquid lilt to them. In the spirit of this being the annual meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association, an organization dedicated to building and maintaining alumni communities that keep alumni connected to each other and to Harvard University, I think this is an opportune moment to introduce one of our most extraordinary alumni in the form of a thank you message. So, to our distinguished guest and fellow alumnus, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO and founder of Facebook, as if I really needed to say that, I say, thank you, sir, from the 330,000 members of the Harvard alumni community for recognizing the importance of human connection in improving the quality of our lives by creating highly innovative technologies that allow for countless numbers of our alumni and others around the world to enjoy the facile manner in which they are able to create meaningful connections that result in lifelong relationships. Thank you, sir, for staying on the mission of making the world a more open place. In this time when elements of free societies and cultures are making concerted efforts to promote insularity. Thank you also for collaborating with your life partner and fellow alumna, the brilliant and talented Dr. Priscilla Chan. A member of the great Harvard College class of 2007, to create the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and sign the Giving Pledge that will provide substantially all of your vast resources to very important initiatives in the fields of technology, life sciences, and education, and as well as the promotion of equality for the benefit of the politically and economically disenfranchised. And I would be remiss on this special occasion if I did not say thank you for using your t-shirt wardrobe to demonstrate to the world that male sartorial elegance doesn't always present itself in a suit, tie, and cufflinks. Most importantly, thank you for being with us today on our special day. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my high honor to introduce Dr. Mark Zuckerberg.
I love this place. Thank you all for coming out in the rain, the pouring rain. We're going to make this worth it for you. President Faust, Board of Overseers, faculty, friends, alumni, proud parents, members of the ad board, and graduates of the greatest university in the world. I am honored to be here with you today because, let's face it, you accomplished something I never could. If I get through this speech today, it'll be the first time I actually finish something here at Harvard. Class of 2017, congratulations. Now, I'm an unlikely speaker today, not just because I dropped out, but because we're technically in the same generation. We walked this yard less than a decade apart. We studied the same ideas and slept through the same Act 10 lectures. We may have taken different roads to get here, especially if you came all the way from the quad. But today, I want to share what I've learned about our generation and the world we're all building together. But first, these last couple of days have brought back a lot of good memories. How many of you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when you got that email telling you got into Harvard? I was playing the video game Civilization, and I ran downstairs and got my dad, and for some reason, his first reaction was to video me opening the email. That could have been a really, really sad video. But I swear, getting into Harvard is the thing my parents are most proud of me for. My mom is nodding. You all know what I'm talking about. Look, guys, it's tough to beat this. You'll see when you get out there. How many of you remember your first lecture here at Harvard? Mine was Computer Science 121 with the incredible Harry Lewis. Harry. I was running late for class, so I threw on a t-shirt, and I didn't realize until afterwards that I put it on inside out and backwards and my tag was sticking out the front. I couldn't figure out why no one in class would talk to me. Except for this one guy, KX Jin. He just went with it. We started doing our problem sets together, and now he runs a big part of Facebook. And that, class of 2017, is why you should be nice to people. But my best memory from Harvard is meeting Priscilla. I had just launched this prank website, Face Mash, and the ad board wanted to see me. Everyone thought I was going to get kicked out. My parents drove up here to help me pack my stuff. My friends threw me a going away party. Who does that? As luck would have it, Priscilla was at that party with her friends, and we met in line for the bathroom in the Foho Bell Tower, and in what must be one of the all-time most romantic lines, I turned to her and said, "I'm getting kicked out in 3 days, so we need to go on a date quickly." Actually, any of you graduating today can use that line. "I'm getting kicked out today. We need to go on a date fast." I didn't end up getting kicked out. I did that to myself. Priscilla and I started dating, and, you know, that movie made it seem like Face Mash was so important to starting Facebook. It wasn't. But without Face Mash, I never would have met Priscilla. And Priscilla's the most important person in my life. So you could still say it was the most important thing I built in my time here. We have all started lifelong friendships here, and some of us even families. That's why I'm so grateful to this place. Thanks, Harvard. Today, I want to talk about purpose. But I'm not here to give you the standard commencement about finding your purpose. We're millennials. We try to do that instinctively. Instead, I'm here to tell you that finding your purpose isn't enough. The challenge for our generation is to create a world where everyone has a sense of purpose. One of my favorite stories is when JFK went to go visit the NASA Space Center, and he saw a janitor holding a broom, and he asked him what he was doing, and the janitor replied, "Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon." Purpose is that feeling that you are a part of something bigger than yourself, that you are needed, and that you have something better ahead to work for. Purpose is what creates true happiness. And you are graduating at a time when this is especially important. When our parents graduated, that sense of purpose reliably came from your job, your church, your community. But today, technology and automation are eliminating many jobs. Membership in a lot of communities has been declining, and a lot of people are feeling disconnected and depressed and are trying to fill a void in their lives. As I've traveled around, I've sat with children in juvenile detention and opioid addicts who told me that maybe their lives would have turned out differently if they just had something to do, an after-school program or somewhere to go. I've met factory workers who know their old jobs aren't coming back and are just trying to find their path ahead. For our society to keep moving forward, we have a generational challenge to not only create new jobs, but create a renewed sense of purpose. I remember that night I launched Facebook from that little dorm in Kirkland House. I went to Noakes with my friend KX, and I remember telling him clearly that I was excited to help connect the Harvard community, but one day someone would connect the whole world. The thing is, it never even occurred to me that that someone might be us. We were just college kids. We didn't know anything about that. There were all these great big technology companies with all these resources, and I just assumed one of them would do it. But this idea was so clear to us that all people want to connect. So we just kept working on it, day after day after day. And I know that a lot of you are going to have your own stories just like this. A change in the world that seems so clear that you are sure someone else is going to do it. But they're not. You will. But it's not enough to have that purpose yourself. You also have to create a sense of purpose for others. And I found that out the hard way. You see, my hope was never to build a company. I wanted to have an impact. And as all these people started joining us, I just assumed that that's what they wanted to do too. So I never took the time to explain what it was that I hoped we'd build. A couple of years in, some big companies wanted to buy us. I didn't want to sell. I wanted to see if we could connect more people. And we were building the first version of Newsfeed at the time, and I thought, if we could just launch this, it could change how we all learn about the world. Nearly everyone else wanted to sell. Without a sense of higher purpose, this was their startup dream come true, and it tore our company apart. After one particularly tense argument, one of my close advisors told me if I didn't agree to sell the company right now, I would regret that decision for the rest of my life. Relationships were so frayed that within a year or so, every single person on our management team was gone. That was my hardest time leading Facebook. I believed in what we were doing, but I felt alone. And worse, it was my fault. I wondered if I was just wrong, an imposter, a 22-year-old kid who had no idea how things actually worked. Now, years later, I understand that that is how things work when there's no sense of higher purpose. So it's up to all of us to create it so we can all keep moving forward together. And today, I want to talk about 3 ways that we can create a world where everyone has a sense of purpose. By taking on big, meaningful projects together. By redefining equality so everyone has the freedom to pursue their purpose. And by building community all across the world. So first, let's take on big, meaningful projects. Our generation is going to have to deal with tens of millions of jobs replaced by automation like self-driving cars and trucks. But we have the potential to do so much more than that. Every generation has its defining works. More than 300,000 people worked to put that man on the moon, including that janitor. Millions of volunteers immunized children around the world against polio, and millions of more people built the Hoover Dam and other great projects. And now it's our generation's turn to do great things. Now I know, maybe you're thinking, I don't know how to build a dam. I don't know how to get 1 million people involved in anything. Well, let me tell you a secret. No one does when they begin. Ideas don't come out fully formed. They only become clear as you work on them. You just have to get started. If I had to know everything about connecting people before I got started, I never would have built Facebook. Movies and pop culture just get this all wrong. The idea of a single eureka moment is a dangerous lie. It makes us feel inadequate because we feel like we haven't had ours yet. And it prevents people with seeds of good ideas from ever getting started in the first place. Oh, and you know what else movies get wrong about innovation? No one writes math formulas on glass, okay? All right? That's not a thing, okay? It's really good to be idealistic, but be prepared to be misunderstood. Anyone working on a big vision is going to get called crazy, even if you end up right. Anyone taking on a complex problem is going to get blamed for not fully understanding it, even though it's impossible to know everything up front. Anyone taking initiative will always get criticized for moving too fast because there's always someone who wants to slow you down. In our society, we often don't take on big things because we're so afraid of making mistakes that we ignore all the things wrong today if we do nothing. The reality is, anything we do today is going to have some issues in the future. But that can't stop us from getting started. So what are we waiting for? It is time for our generation defining great works. How about stopping climate change before we destroy the planet and getting millions of people involved, manufacturing and installing solar panels? How about curing all diseases and getting people involved by asking volunteers to share their health data, track their health data, and share their genomes? You know, today, our society spends more than 50 times as much treating people who are sick as we invest in finding cures so people don't get sick in the first place. It makes no sense. We can fix this. How about modernizing democracy so everyone can vote online? And how about personalizing education so everyone can learn? These achievements are all within our reach. Let's do them all in a way that gives everyone in our society a role. Let's do big things, not just to create progress, but to create purpose. So taking on big, meaningful projects together is the first thing we can do to create a world where everyone has a sense of purpose. The second is redefining our idea of equality so everyone has the freedom to pursue their purpose. Now, many of our parents had stable jobs throughout their careers, but in our generation, we're all a little entrepreneurial, whether we're starting our own projects or finding our role in another one. And, you know, that's great, because our culture of entrepreneurship is how we create so much progress. An entrepreneurial culture thrives when it is easy to try lots of new ideas. Facebook wasn't the first thing I built. I also built chat systems and games, study tools and music players, and I'm not alone. J.K. Rowling got rejected 12 times before she finally wrote and published Harry Potter. Even Beyoncé had to make hundreds of songs to get Halo. The greatest successes come from having the freedom to fail. Now, today, we have a level of wealth inequality that hurts everyone. When you don't have the freedom to take your idea and turn it into a historic enterprise, we all lose. And right now, today, our society is way over-indexed on rewarding people when they're successful, and we don't do nearly enough to make sure that everyone can take lots of different shots. Now, let's face it. There is something wrong with our system when I can leave here and make billions of dollars in 10 years while millions of students can't even afford to pay off their loans, let alone start a business. Look, I know a lot of entrepreneurs, and I don't know a single person who gave up on starting a business because they were worried they might not make enough money. But I know too many people who haven't had the chance to pursue their dreams because they didn't have a cushion to fall back on if they failed. We all know you don't get successful just by having a good idea or working hard. You get successful by being lucky too. If I had to support my family growing up instead of having the time to learn how to code, if I didn't know that I was going to be fine if Facebook didn't work out, then I wouldn't be standing up here today. And if we're honest, we all know how much luck we've had to get to this point in our lives. Every generation expands its definition of equality. Previous generations fought for the vote and civil rights. They had the New Deal and Great Society. And now it's time for our generation to define a new social contract. We should have a society that measures progress not just by economic metrics like GDP, but by how many of us have a role we find meaningful. We should explore ideas like universal basic income to make sure that everyone has a cushion to try new ideas. We're all going to change jobs and roles many times, so we need affordable childcare to get to work and healthcare that's not tied to just one employer. And we're all going to make mistakes. So we need a society that's less focused on locking us up and stigmatizing us when we do. And as our technology keeps on evolving, we need a society that is more focused on providing continuous education through our lives. And yes, giving everyone the freedom to pursue purpose isn't going to be free. People like me should pay for it. And a lot of you are going to do really well, and you should too. That is why Priscilla and I started the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and committed our wealth to promoting equal opportunity. These are the values of our whole generation. It was never a question of if we were going to do this. The only question was when. Millennials are already one of the most charitable generations in history. In just 1 year, more than 3 in 4 U.S. millennials donated to charity, and more than 7 in 10 raised money for another one. But it's not just about giving money. You can also give time. And I promise you, if you just take an hour or two a week, that's all it takes to give someone a hand and help them reach their potential. Now, maybe you're thinking, that's a lot of time. I'm not sure if I have that much time. I used to think that. You know, when Priscilla graduated from Harvard, she became a teacher. And before she'd do education work with me, she told me that I needed to get my own experience teaching a class. At first I complained. You know, I'm kind of busy. I'm running this company. But she insisted. So I taught an after-school program at the local Boys and Girls Club on entrepreneurship. I taught those kids lessons on product development and marketing, and they taught me what it was like growing up feeling targeted for your race and what it's like having a family member in prison. I shared stories of my time in school, and they shared their hope that one day they would get to go to college too. For 5 years, I've had dinner with those students every month. One of them even threw Priscilla and me our first baby shower. And next year, they're going to college. Every one of them, first generation in their families. We can all make time to give someone a hand. Let's give everyone the freedom to pursue purpose, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because when more people can turn their dreams into something great, we are all better for it. Purpose doesn't only come from work. The third way we can create a sense of purpose for everyone is by building community. And in our generation, when we say purpose for everyone, we mean everyone in the world. Now, quick show of hands. How many of you here are from another country? All right, now keep your hands up. How many of you are friends with one of these folks? Now we're talking. See, we have grown up connected. In a recent survey of millennials around the world, asking what most defines our identity, the most popular answer wasn't nationality, ethnicity, or religion. It was citizen of the world. That's a big deal. Every generation expands the circle of people we consider one of us. And in our generation, that now includes the whole world. We understand that the great arc of human history bends towards people coming together in ever greater numbers, from tribes to cities to nations, to achieve things that we could not on our own. We get that our greatest opportunities are now global. We can be the generation that ends poverty, that ends disease. And we get that our greatest challenges need global responses too. No country can fight climate change alone or prevent pandemics. Progress now requires coming together, not just as cities or nations, but also as a global community. But we live in an unstable time. There are people left behind by globalization across the whole world. And it's tough to care about people in other places when we don't first feel good about our lives here at home. There's pressure to turn inwards. This is the struggle of our time. The forces of freedom, openness, and global community against the forces of authoritarianism, isolationism, and nationalism. Forces for the flow of knowledge, trade, and immigration against those who would slow them down. This is not a battle of nations. It is a battle of ideas. There are people in every country for more global connection, and there are good people against it. And this isn't going to be decided at the UN either. It's going to happen at the local level when enough of us feel a sense of purpose and stability in our own lives that we can start to open up and care about everyone else too. And the best way to do that is to start building local communities right now. We all get a lot of meaning from our communities. Who here's from Elliott House? How about Lowell? I know you guys found community because you literally live right on top of each other. And Mather? I'll just leave that there. Whether our communities are houses or sports teams, churches or a cappella groups, they give us that sense that we are a part of something bigger, that we are not alone. They give us the strength to expand our horizons. And that's why it's so striking that over the past few decades, membership in all kinds of communities has declined by as much as 1/4. That's a lot of people who now need to find a sense of purpose somewhere else. But I know that we can rebuild these communities and start new ones because many of you already are. I met Agnes Segoye, who's graduating today. Agnes, where are you? Agnes spent her childhood navigating conflict zones with human trafficking in Uganda, and now she's trained thousands of law enforcement officials to keep communities safe. I met Kayla Oakley and Neha Jain, who are graduating today too. Stand up, guys. Kayla and Neha started a nonprofit that connects people suffering from chronic illnesses with people in their communities who are willing to help out. And I met David Razu Aznar, who's graduating from the Kennedy School today. David, stand up. David is a former city councilor who fought to make Mexico City the first Latin American city to pass marriage equality, even before San Francisco. And this is my story too. A student in a dorm, connecting one community at a time, and keeping at it until one day we can connect the whole world. Change starts local. Even global change starts small with people like us. In our generation, the struggle of whether we connect more, whether we achieve our greatest opportunities, comes down to this: your ability to build communities and create a world where every single person has a sense of purpose. Class of 2017, you are graduating into a world that needs purpose. And it's up to you to create it. Now, maybe you're asking yourself, can I really do this? Well, remember when I told you about that class I taught at the Boys and Girls Club? One day after class, I was talking to my students about going to college, and one of my top students raised his hand and said that he wasn't sure he could go to college because he's undocumented. He wasn't sure if they'd take him. Last year, I took him out to breakfast for his birthday, and I wanted to get him a gift, so I asked him what he wanted, and he just started talking about struggles that he saw other students in his class facing, and finally said, I'd really just like a book on social justice. I was blown away. Here is a young guy who has every reason to be cynical. He wasn't sure if the country he calls home, the only one he's known, was going to deny him his dream of going to college. But he wasn't feeling sorry for himself. He wasn't even thinking of himself. He has a greater sense of purpose, and he's going to bring people along with him. It says something about our situation today that I can't even say his name because I don't want to put him at risk. But if a high school senior who doesn't know what the future holds for him can do his part to move the world forward, then we owe it to the world to do our part too. So before you walk out those gates one last time, and as we sit here in front of Memorial Church, I'm reminded of a prayer, Mishaberach, that I say whenever I face a big challenge, that I sing to my daughter, thinking of her future when I tuck her in at night. And it goes, "May the source of strength, who's blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing." I hope you find the courage to make your life a blessing. Congratulations, class of 2017. Good luck out there. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mark. We are so fortunate to have you with us today so that we can rejoice in your commitment to improving our ability to unlock the full extent of our human potential. So, no Harvard gathering would be complete without the singing of our school anthem. Before we close these afternoon exercises, please stand and join me now as we sing Fair Harvard. The words appear in your program. On behalf of the Harvard Alumni